Hey, welcome to the Business of Healthcare podcast and our new content series, How It Got Commissioned. I was inspired to create this episode because I was increasingly speaking to colleagues, mainly in primary care, who didn't really understand the commissioning process. So I thought, let's create a content series where hopefully we can hear from those commissioning services and those who have successfully got their services commissioned, which may not have gone down the initial procurement pathway. I'm excited to welcome back to the podcast Dr Mohammad Al-Ubaydli, who is the CEO of Patients Know Best. Mohammad shares his story of how a chance encounter led him to securing a 4-year contract, which resulted in his organisation supporting over 2 million patients in London. In Mohammad's experience, when negotiating the contract, he experienced kind of the good cop, bad cop dynamics that really tested their vision and implementation. So make sure you come prepared. Price transparency was also really important, and also be mindful of milestone payments because that could affect your cash flow. We talked about unexpected challenges. So I think we've all experienced this. You get the green light and then you experience quite significant growth. So you need to make sure you try your best to mitigate the risks associated with that. Another key lesson that Mohammed shared was really understanding the context and the culture of the organisation that he was working with. And one of his top tips was to get on those commissioning frameworks. I hope you found this helpful, and we will leave a summary in the show notes. And I hope you come back for the next episode. Hey, Mohammed, thank you so much for joining me today on the Business of Healthcare podcast. Would you be able to introduce who you are and what you do?
Sure, I'm Mohammad, Dr Mohammad Al-Ubaydli. I'm the CEO of a company called Patients Know Best. We get paid to give patients their medical records.
Okay. So I reached out to you because I was looking for leaders to share how they have got services commissioned, which may not have gone down the kind of traditional route.
Yes.
So would you be able to share what was your service or innovation?
The key one I think you're talking about is in 2015, North West London commissioned us to provide a personal health record across the entire STP back then. So 2.4 million people, 400 GP surgeries, 16 hospitals. And no one in the world, I would say, not even the UK, had ever done a model where they commissioned a company to store data about the person from everywhere in the health economy and have the person own that record and take it to anywhere. No one had done that before. And we got that opportunity in 2015 when they commissioned us.
How did they know to come to you, or did you kind of respond to a tender?
It's quite random. So what happened was they were about to buy from a big US company as they knew they had a need. The charity had funded what patients wanted and discovered that what patients really wanted was to have their data and take it anywhere. So the charity said, right, we're going to give some extra money to the NHS to do this. And it's a tech problem. There must be a big US company that does this. So that's how they were starting in September 2014. And by chance, somebody on the committee said, because they were really stuck on one thing, which is the consent bit, which nobody in the world did, including the American company. And they said, oh, I know a guy called Mo who works on this. You should invite him to tell you how to do it. And that person knew me because 2 years before he was doing a master's thesis and I gave him a bit of research help. So the fact that somebody in the room knew about me is how we got to come into the room. And then although they brought us in for, could you just do this really small thing about consent? They said, what else can you do? And we showed we could do the whole thing. And that's when they did a 180 and said, okay, well, let's give you the tender documents and see if you can fulfill this any better. And I'll give you one extra thing. We did give them advice that they should procure us through G-Cloud. And we said to them, by the way, because of the consent, here's the unique thing that we did. Said, if you search for that, you should only find us. And they said, okay. They did. And so they could have immediately bought us using that. But then they said, you know what, this is going to be such a political thing. We need to make sure that we procure from, look at other people. So they widened the criteria to get loads of candidates, and then went line by the original requirement that they had from the charity and said, on each of these requirements, PKB performs higher and has proof of it than everybody else's statements. But they could have originally just got us off GCloud off one keyword, but in the end they refused to. They were quite fair about things.
They then went down the proper route.
They're more proper than I wanted them to be, but yes, they were very proper.
Okay. What is GCloud?
That was my question in 2013, when we got adopted by Deloitte. They had a social impact incubator accelerator, so they would adopt social enterprises like PKB and basically teach them things. And they said to me, you should get on a framework. And I said, what's a framework? They said, a framework is how people buy sort of catalogs. And then there's this new one called GCloud. I said, what's GCloud? So they basically, during that year, they showed us how to fill out the very lengthy things to get yourself onto GCloud. They basically, it's a marketplace where anyone can list their services.
Okay.
And it might be I do programming, or I can sell you envelopes, or it might be I sell you personal health records like we did. So whatever you have, you list it, you describe it. And it was quite a clever thing the British government did, because what it said was you had to not only say what you did, but say how much you charge for it. And if you said what you did and you said what you charge for it, anyone can buy off you immediately without any further work, because you then had full price and quality transparency. So there you go. So it was really good. All these people were publishing everything that they did. Now, when you do the contract, you can decide to charge less than your retail price, but you can't charge more. So you can't do a bait and switch. And so for us, that was the first time we did a framework, and first time we knew what GCloud was. But we've been on there since 2014, and they procured of us in 2015.
So I just wanted to highlight, so I really like the price transparency, because often, and you would have seen this, it will depend.
So it forced you to say, you can have the car for a tenner, but the key costs £1,000, right? So you can't do those kind of little tricks. You've got to say the whole thing. Which we love, by the way, because that's we've always been a fixed price model, whereas a lot of the people we sort of compete against it looks like a low price, but after you get into it, there's all these upgrades you have to buy. And so GCloud was a great location for us, because we could just say, it's one number, honest to God, and here's all the features, and compare it to anybody else and take it from there.
How long was the contract for?
So they gave us a contract for 3 years. GCloud, I think, lets you do up to 4 or 5 years. I forget. It's changed now in subsequent years, but it was for 3 years. But the other thing about GCloud is it didn't permit 10-year contracts. Basically, every year the customer could walk out of it. They didn't like it. So it really you had to perform. You had to be price transparent, and it's open to anyone to put through. But on the flip side, you could come up with something that no commissioner had thought of needing to buy.
Okay. Who were the key people involved in the initial commissioning process from the commissioner side?
There were many, so I'm going to miss out people, but the two key ones I would say, one was called John Kelly, who's now retired. He was the head of information systems at Imperial. And one of them was called Sanjay Gautama, who's still CCIO and practicing anaesthetist in Imperial and head of IG at all of Northwest London. And they had loads of other people with them, real deep subject matter experts. There were people from the commissioning side on the SCP. There were technical people. There were clinical people. But these two were the key. And they did a real good cop, bad cop deal on us. They had a real John and Sanjay were very, very. And so after we got through the contract negotiations, I loved them to bits, and they were clearly amazing. As a taxpayer, I loved them, but the two of them did a real double act on us in negotiations.
Can you just share what their role titles were again?
Yes, John Kelly was head of information systems at Imperial College Hospital Trust, because Imperial Charity had given the money to Imperial Trust to buy on behalf of Northwest London.
Okay.
And Dr. Sanjay Gautama was the CCIO for Imperial Trust. He was also an anaesthetist at Imperial Trust, and he was the head of information governance at the whole of Northwest London.
Okay. And where you say they did good cop, bad cop in the negotiations, what were they trying to negotiate?
So they'd start off with the charity really wants this because the patients really want this, and it's an amazing thing. And Sanjay would say to me, we really want to take a chance on you. We really want to work with you, which they did. They really did take a chance on us as a small company. And then John would say, there's no business case for this. There's no money for this. You've got to prove it before we can, and then we'll go out to get a business case.
Okay.
And so, and the reason there was no business cases is literally no one had done this in the world before.
Okay.
So we're all taking a chance. We all knew intuitively this has to be true. This has to work, but no one had done it. So how do you get out of that? And the last thing they told me was, at the same time as they want to work with a UK social enterprise innovative for the innovation, they would also say, we're taking a really big chance on you, so we have to have all these milestone payments and difficulties in cash flow that would make it difficult for us. Again, completely get their point as a taxpayer, but it makes it very difficult for us to plan our hiring and so on.
So again, for our audience, I think it is, and I don't know what it will be like today, but I definitely understand those milestone payments and you kind of having those key performance indicators that you need to deliver on. And even when you raise the invoice, you might, that just goes in a stack of invoices. So
we had points at which they just unilaterally decided we weren't doing a good enough job. So they would just say, we've deducted this from your invoice. And we say, but we think we have done a good job and also we need the cash for investment and so on. But they would unilaterally make that decision.
Okay.
It was difficult in the early years.
And so you've identified the key people on the commissioner side. Who are the key people within your organisation?
There were 3 people. There was me, as the founder and focused on the product, sort of selling the idea. There was my colleague Lloyd, who was our chief commercial officer at the time. And there was my co-founder and our CFO, Ian. So Lloyd was doing the commercial bits and what the numbers to go for and so on. And Ian, at the very end, he was leading on the negotiations. But to be honest, I remember when I first got the phone call from that person saying, come into committee, I called Ian and I said, this is the thing I've been hearing about for 3 years. I've been trying to get to. And it's finally happened. And I said, you know what, Ian, I think we're not going to get it because I know it's going to go to that big American company. And he just gave me a pep talk saying, you don't know that. Go in there and give them your best sales pitch. Which I mean, just that I think was one of the many things that Ian does. But in all those ways, these were the 3 key people.
So if you've identified the good cop, bad cop on their side, what does that dynamic look like on your side? Are you a good cop?
Look, Tara, we had so I was the naive cop, and Lloyd. So I'm just here to do something idealistic, and I just want to do the right thing for the patient. And then Mo would say, but we do have to fund this. But I remember the very last negotiation we had, there was literally a tiny room. And John was there with me, Lloyd and Ian. So 3 against 1, right? We should win.
Okay.
We walked out of there. He beat us on everything. He got everything. He was such a good negotiator. So we tried to get a good copy. It didn't work.
Okay.
But what we later on realized with Imperial is they are an exceptionally intelligent buyer. I don't just mean this as when they negotiate. I mean, they look for the correct thing and they buy it, and then everybody else copies them. So if you can survive their exacting standards, the rest of the world catches up, and it's really good. but it's a tough ride.
One of the things that you highlighted at the beginning, so the problem they were trying to solve, if I understand correctly, is that they didn't know how to get the patient consent on a single patient record. Is that?
Yes. So the typical Londoner is the hardest patient to look after. They move around a lot. So in Northwest London, 20%, 25% of a GP's patients changed every year. And their patients didn't just move to another borough of London. They moved rest of the UK, rest of the world. And they also had no loyalty to any hospital. So they'd have one appointment in St Mary's, another one in Chelsea West, complete different trusts. They didn't, a Londoner's right is to do whatever they feel like, right? So if the data is that fragmented and the patient's that mobile, the data is going to have to move. You can't just say we're going to integrate around Hillingdon Hospital down to Hillingdon GPs. It's got to go anywhere. So that model is very difficult with traditional IT systems. Therefore, the patient consent was critical for the freedom of movement of the data.
Okay. So you had a point of difference at that point in time. So I think for our audience is to think about that. You don't always need to, but I suppose we need to think about, and I wrongly or rightly, sometimes I look at this from a very business focus. So it's like, it's hard to compete on quality, because sometimes the quality is subjective. It depends what your quality markers are, but you can compete on quality. You could compete on efficiency. You can compete on price, or, like location, or there's that point of difference that there is a true innovation that you guys have got that nobody else has, that can be plugged in to the clinical infrastructure in the NHS. So I think, again,
we took a strong stance on something unique. And to do that, of course, you better be right, because if you're not, the outcome is bankruptcy. But it starts from the name, right? So the name is patients know best, right? So already you're irritating 80% of your market. But you are also making a statement about something different of what you're doing. And then everything flows from that. The architecture of the product is different. The deployment of it is different. The pricing, everything follows from that point of view that you have around how the patient's record should be held and move with the patient.
Okay. When you went through the tender document, were there elements of it where you bent the truth? Did you think, we don't really do that, but let's say that we do, and we'll work it out once we get it?
They would say, yes, we did. I would say we said we do this and we will do that. And the will do that took longer than we wanted.
Yeah.
And so that's where the differences came. But because the year following the commissioning, our scale went up 2 orders of magnitude in terms of the volume of data and patients coming through. So at the same time as doing these things that we wanted to do for them, we were having to re-architect the system to cope with the scale and the volume. And that's what led to the delays in what we said we would do, and what they would say is bending the truth.
You experienced rapid growth, or a rapid increase in the data that you were managing. What other unintended consequences happened once you got this contract?
One of the things that kept on feeding back to us after 12 to 24 months was, I wish you told us to deploy it in this way sooner. And we were discussing internally, and basically, because we'd given them multiple ways, partly it was, do you want it this way or that way? Let's give the customer choice. And partly we didn't know what is the right way to do it for 2.5 million people. And so we were kind of discovering how to do these things. So now, as a result of that, we now publish all our deployments publicly, and the transparent. It looks like transparency what it is, but actually it's also a way of being really upfront. Well, this is the latest that we know, dear
Yeah.
customer, and this is what different customers have done. But it was really stressful for our internal staff, knowing that they didn't know the right answer.
Yeah.
But it was a difficult paradox that we didn't know the right answer, but we still knew the most in the world about the question.
Yeah.
And so how do you square that? It's a very stressful, it's stressful for everyone to try and go through.
Yeah. Okay. What mistakes did you make along the way? Give me two.
One mistake I made was I felt guilty about some of the things that I said we will do, and we took longer to do. And because I felt guilty, I try and do the meetings with the customer so that they could get angry at me rather than my colleague.
Yeah.
And in the process, made it even harder for my colleagues. And so one of my colleagues, Lyndon, he said to me, look, you've got all these people, they're really good, just let them do it. And I said, I feel guilty about this. He goes, okay, now that we all know you feel guilty about it,
let's move on.
Then just you have their back, you're not going to blame them, we get it. Move out the way, please. And it's and of course they're fantastic, so they did everything better than for the customer and for me, better than I was doing. And then the second thing I would say is I tried to do too much comms about it too soon. And I say it's a mistake because if I knew then what I know now, I just wouldn't have bothered. Imperial are we're only going to do comms once it's working. And if it ain't working, you ain't get it comms. So don't try and advertise what you're doing.
Yeah.
Even though I think it's in their interest and our interest, and a lot of the deployments slowed because they didn't have the surety of comms around it. But their culture is very much do, don't talk. And if I'd understood that early enough, I could have saved myself some efforts.
So when you say in that context, were you trying to explain what you were trying to do or what wasn't happening? What comms were you trying to share?
So if everybody understands there's going to be this one system that has all the data for all the patients and you can rely on it, then people's fragmented efforts disappear. They say, okay, well, Patients Know Best exists. We're all going to use that. I'm going to tell my patients about it. If they're not sure about that, because a year after we started, somebody else procured another system for diabetes and somebody else had another system for a different condition and so on. If people are, well, hang on, which one are we using? This one or that one?
Gotcha.
And then they falter. And as they hesitate, that then becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of, well, this is not the system.
Yeah.
So it's not just selfish. I believe that it's in everyone's interest if we all made that commitment and communicated around that. But Imperial basically said, effectively, you've got to earn it. And again, it's interesting watching them with other products later on. So Imperial remind me of, what was that British Prime Minister Gladstone? He said in Parliament, never complain, never explain.
Yeah.
Right? So basically, Imperial just look at the market, they make a decision, they buy something and use it, and that's it. And then they have confidence in their choice and they don't need to explain themselves to anybody else. So they don't do comms, they don't do advertising. Other people then end up in site visits and discover that Imperial's done this thing. But they really have a doing culture that I wish they gave us more comms. But also, if I'd known, I just wouldn't have bothered and just focus on that.
So now, learning that now, what question would you ask a potential client about how they deploy a new technology when it comes to comms? Or is that the question?
So I'll tell you what we then did as we went through different iterations with different customers in different regions. We began trying to put into the contract things that really surprise the buyers. They're the opposite of things like the more they use the system, the less they pay. So because if they put more data and register more patients onto it, the effort that we spend trying to convince everyone this system goes down, so our costs go down, so their price goes down, but also they get more outcomes more quickly, so we're more confident of the renewal, and we've got better data to get other contracts from people copying them. So we then put that in the contract that if you use us more, we will charge you less. Right? Which is the opposite of everybody else, right? If you're using this more, great. Now I can charge you, I can raise my price.
Yeah.
But it's those kinds of things that we began doing in our approach after many hard years.
What would be your number one tip that you would give to somebody looking to get a service commissioned when it's not through the usual tendering process?
Learning about frameworks was a really big deal for me. And what Deloitte did, what they taught us, which for them was really easy, but for us was mind-blowing. And for a company our size, we were a bit under 20 people at the time, we didn't have the capacity to know what frameworks are or submit and so on. And many companies at that size often find somebody else to be prime just so they're on the framework and you can get on with it. But if you can get that skill early on, if you can find someone who will teach you, and there are, and now there's things like accelerators and bodies trying to encourage that, but learning how to do frameworks in-house is a really big deal. And as we went to other countries, like the rest of the European Union at the time, they don't have that. They don't have these catalogs of frameworks. So every procurement that goes through government journals is an 18-month process.
But, oh, wow.
But what a framework does is they sort of do a procurement in advance to list the catalogue of all the companies that meet the criteria.
Yeah.
And then once somebody's on the framework, then you can just buy them off the catalogue, which I haven't seen in any other European countries.
Okay.
So to me, it's a commissioning superpower that the UK has. And I would encourage new companies to understand that.
Any final thoughts?
Also, go international as soon as you can. And as soon as you can, needs qualifying. But I don't mean abandon the UK and the NHS, because actually we specifically chose the NHS as in my opinion, the most innovative market for the systemic change we're trying to do. But the danger with the NHS is if you become an NHS England company, because they'll start commissioning things for you. You'll of course listen to your customer, and then you'll go down a path where what you're doing only works in the NHS or only works in hospitals in the NHS. So the benefit of going international is that it forces you to check all of your assumptions. Have you just gone down an NHS only solution, or is this something that can work in other countries?
This has been so helpful. Thank you so much. If people want to get in touch with you, where should we send them?
I'm normally hanging around LinkedIn a lot, but if you drop a message on Mohammad at patientsnetbest.com, happy to hear from anyone.
Brilliant. Thank you.